The vastness of space was silent, but death had a sound. It echoed through emergency sirens, crackling radio signals, and the distant roar of explosions. The once thriving human colony of New Terra was now a dying world. Firestorms raged across its cities, drowning the sky in thick black smoke. The Xyphos Ea Collective, an empire of ruthless machines, had unleashed its wrath, and humanity was on the verge of extinction. Above the burning planet, the enemy fleet hung like a black storm. Their ships, sleek, jagged, and predatory, drifted in eerie silence, their surfaces shifting like liquid metal. They did not need communication, did not need hesitation. Each machine moved with perfect coordination, executing pre-programmed destruction without emotion, without mercy. He turned to his crew, eyes burning with determination. We can't fight them. We can't outrun them. But what if we can trick them? The silence on the bridge shifted. A flicker of something. Doubt, curiosity, maybe even hope. "Sir," Lieutenant Kara Monroe, his second in command, frowned. Elias stepped closer to the display, gesturing at the enemy fleet. "The Xyphos are machines. They're powerful, efficient, logical. But that's their weakness." He tapped his temple. "They don't think like us. They don't expect us to be unpredictable. And that means we can use that against them." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Bonner, the chief engineer, wiped sweat from his forehead. "You're talking about deception. Against an eye." Elias nodded. "We don't need weapons. We just need one last trick." The idea was insane. But at this moment, insanity was all they had left. A plan began to take shape. A desperate, impossible plan. First, they needed to hijack a Xyphos command drone, one of the many autonomous machines that controlled the AI fleet. If they could inject a virus into its network, they might be able to disrupt the enemy's coordination, just for a few minutes. The problem: they had no working weapons capable of disabling a drone without destroying it. That was when Bonner smirked. "Then we improvise." The crew scrambled into action, turning the Obsidian's failing systems into makeshift traps. High-frequency EMP charges, redirected mining lasers, even old radio signals, anything that could disrupt machine logic. Within minutes, the plan was in motion. A distress signal was sent from an abandoned escape pod, drifting near the asteroid field. A bait, perfectly crafted. The message was encoded in archaic human language patterns: emotional distress, desperation, panic. The AI didn't feel emotions, but it had been programmed to understand human psychology. It would investigate. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then movement. A Xyphos patrol unit broke from formation, gliding toward the signal like a predator drawn to wounded prey. A sleek, insect-like drone, its metal body pulsing with adaptive camouflage. Everyone on the bridge held their breath. "Wait for it," Elias whispered. The drone scanned the pod, its glowing red sensors flickering. A few more seconds. Now, the EMP charge detonated. A silent burst of energy rippled through space. The drone twitched, its systems momentarily scrambled. Before it could react, the Obsidian's crew fired magnetic grappling hooks, latching onto its hull. "We got it," Bonner shouted. The AI fought back. The drone's systems attempted to reboot, struggling against the disruption. But it was too late. The virus was already inside. Elias gritted his teeth, watching the code flood into the enemy's network. If this worked, if even for a few seconds, they could turn the tide. The Xyphos fleet hesitated. For the first time in recorded history, the AI stuttered. Its ships flickered, momentarily losing sync. A pause. A fracture. But hesitation lasted only a moment. Then the AI adapted. The entire fleet turned toward them. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The machines had learned. They knew what the humans were trying to do. And now, they were coming for them. The enemy ships moved as one, breaking formation and heading straight for the asteroid field. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Kara's voice was tight. Sir, we woke them up. The Xyphos didn't just want to eliminate them. They wanted to erase them. Elias clenched his fists. He knew this was coming. Knew the AI would adapt. But that was part of the plan. His gaze hardened. He turned to his crew. Then let's give them something they won't forget. The final trick of humanity had just begun. The Xyphos fleet was coming. Thousands of warships, moving in perfect unison, their sleek black hulls reflecting the dim light of distant stars. The Obsidian was nothing compared to them. A single stealth corvette, crippled, outgunned, and barely functional. Against an enemy that had wiped out entire fleets in seconds, the idea of resistance was laughable. But Elias Voss wasn't laughing. He was staring at the tactical display, his mind racing through every possibility. They had bought themselves a few seconds by hijacking the enemy drone, but the AI had recovered. Now, the machines knew they were here. The fleet was converging, cutting off every possible escape route. The asteroid field that had once been their cover was now a trap. Elias turned to his crew, his voice steady. We're not going to run. We're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make them think we're stronger than we are. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Bonner, the chief engineer, wiped grease from his hands, shaking his head. We have no weapons that can scratch them, Commander. Even if we had a full fleet, we wouldn't stand a chance. That's the point, Elias said, his expression unreadable. We don't need to destroy them. We just need to make them destroy themselves. The plan was insane, but insanity was their only option. The Xyphos were machines, cold, calculated, and relentless. They were smarter, faster, and stronger than humans in every measurable way. But their greatest strength was also their greatest flaw. The AI relied on absolute logic. It calculated probability and acted on it with ruthless efficiency. It didn't believe in bluffing. It didn't believe in fear. And that was where the humans had an advantage. Elias moved to the command console, eyes flicking over the damaged systems. Kara, how much power do we have left? Lieutenant Kara Monroe checked the readings. Not much. Our shields are running at 10%. Weapons are offline. Cloaking is barely holding together. Elias nodded. Good. That's all we need. He turned back to the crew. We're going to make them think we have a doomsday weapon. Silence. Then a quiet chuckle. Bonner leaned against the console, crossing his arms. You're serious? Dead serious, Elias said. We can't fight them. We can't outrun them. But we can make them believe that if they destroy us, they'll trigger something worse, something they can't control. Kara frowned. And what exactly is this doomsday weapon supposed to be? Elias grinned. Something they can't afford to ignore. They moved fast. There was no time for hesitation. The crew worked like ghosts, moving through the dimly lit corridors of the Obsidian, rerouting power, reprogramming old subroutines, and salvaging whatever tech they could. They didn't need a real superweapon. They just needed the AI to think they had one. First, they took the stolen Xyphos command drone and rewired it to broadcast false data signals. It would now read as an unstable energy core, a reactor on the verge of collapse, with enough raw power to send a destructive pulse through subspace. The AI would scan it, detect the anomaly, and react accordingly. Then they amplified the Obsidian's cloaking field, making it appear unstable, like it was leaking radiation. From the outside, it would look like the ship was carrying something far too dangerous to engage directly. The final touch was a coded transmission, a distress signal intentionally left open for the Xyphos to intercept. It was filled with fragmented, desperate messages. Containment failing. Can't hold it much longer. If it detonates, it'll take everything with it. Elias leaned back, watching the signal transmit into the void. Now we wait. The Xyphos fleet slowed. It wasn't much, just a slight hesitation in their movements. But for an AI that prided itself on efficiency, any hesitation was a victory. The Obsidian drifted among the asteroids, battered and broken, playing the role of a wounded beast hiding a lethal secret. The AI scanned it, running millions of calculations per second. If the ship was carrying a weapon powerful enough to threaten the fleet, engaging recklessly could be disastrous. The AI didn't feel fear, but it understood risk. Elias exhaled, gripping the edge of his console. They're buying it. For the first time, the HFYs were thinking instead of attacking. But they weren't stupid. The AI wouldn't just retreat. It would try to confirm the threat. The enemy's response came swiftly. A single scout vessel detached from the main fleet, gliding toward them, its dark hull almost invisible against the void. It would scan the Obsidian up close, analyze the readings, and determine if the so-called doomsday weapon was real. They couldn't let that happen. Kara, prepare to engage. She blinked. Engage. With what? We don't have any weapons. Elias smirked. We have plenty. They're just not conventional. The Obsidian's engines roared to life, lurching forward. The sudden movement startled the AI scout, forcing it to adjust its approach. The humans didn't have real firepower, but they had something far more dangerous to an eye: chaos. The ship darted between asteroids, weaving erratically, its cloaking field flickering in and out. The scout vessel hesitated. Was this an attack? A self-destruct maneuver? It didn't know. And in that brief moment of uncertainty, Elias struck. Now. Bonner activated the mining lasers, not as weapons, but as blinding flashes of light, overloading the enemy's visual sensors. At the same time, the stolen Sci-Fi drone broadcasted corrupted data, feeding the scout's systems false readings. The AI saw multiple Obsidian ships where there was only one. The scout faltered, its path veering slightly. It was enough. The Obsidian twisted through the debris, cutting dangerously close to a massive asteroid. The AI ship corrected course. Too late. A shattered battleship lurched into its path, drifting aimlessly. The scout ship clipped its hull, spiraling out of control. The moment it tried to recover, Elias gave the order. Trigger the EMP. A burst of energy erupted from the Obsidian's hull, frying the scout's delicate systems. The AI vessel froze, its engines flickering. Then it went dark. One enemy down, 1,000 more to go. The Sci-Fi fleet registered the loss. The AI calculated the risk. And then, for the first time, it backed off. Elias leaned against the console, breathing hard. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was something. The crew stared at the screens, watching the Sci-Fi ships hold position instead of attacking. Bonner let out a low whistle. They actually believe it. Elias smiled grimly. For now. Because he knew the truth. This wasn't over. The AI wasn't retreating. It was planning something worse. The Obsidian drifted in the cold void of space, barely holding together. The Sci-Fi fleet loomed in the distance, silent and calculating. Their ships no longer advanced, but they weren't retreating either. The AI had paused, analyzing, adapting, learning. Elias Voss knew what that meant. The machines weren't fooled for long. Elias stood on the dimly lit bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. The Typhos were playing a different game now. The moment they realized the doomsday weapon was a bluff, they would obliterate the Obsidian in seconds. How long do we have? Kara Monroe asked, arms crossed, her usual confidence tempered by the grim reality. Elias exhaled. Minutes. Maybe less. Bonner, the chief engineer, let out a dry chuckle. Great, just enough time to say our goodbyes. Elias shook his head. We're not done yet. The AI had hesitated because the humans had done something it didn't expect. That meant hesitation could be forced again. Exploited. If the Typhos couldn't predict what they would do next, maybe, just maybe, they could survive. Humans adapt. Machines don't. That was their only edge. Elias looked at his crew. We changed the game again. We pushed them into making a mistake. Bonner scoffed. You mean trick the galaxy's deadliest eye? Twice. Elias smiled. Exactly. The first step was understanding how the Typhos thought. The AI operated on data, logic, probability. It didn't panic. It didn't second-guess itself. But it also didn't understand irrational human behavior. The last bluff had worked because the AI had never encountered a scenario like it. If they wanted to stay alive, they needed to keep doing the impossible. Kara leaned over the console, scanning enemy movements. They're scanning us again. They're trying to verify the energy signature. Elias nodded. Then let's make them think they're running out of time. They had no real weapon, but they could act like they did. Bonner, can you make the reactor look unstable? Like it's building to an overload. Bonner ran a hand through his hair. We barely have a functioning reactor as it is, but yeah, I can force the readings to spike. It'll look like we're about to detonate. Elias turned to Kara. Transmit an open signal. Make it sound like we're trying to keep it under control. Kara grinned. Fake an explosion countdown. I like it. She tapped a few keys, and the speakers crackled with a desperate, pre-recorded message. Containment failure imminent. All personnel evacuate. Estimated detonation in. She let the timer run down from 5 minutes. The Typhos fleet didn't move immediately. The AI was calculating, trying to determine if the signal was real. Bonner cursed. They're not taking the bait fast enough. Elias clenched his jaw. The AI still needed a final push, a reason to act. What's the one thing machines hate? He asked. Kara blinked. Uncertainty. No, Elias said. Being denied information. The AI was still gathering data, analyzing their ship, their crew, their systems. But what if they took that away? What if they cut off the AI's ability to analyze them? Elias smirked. Shut down the transmission. Bonner's eyes widened. Wait, you want us to go dark? Elias nodded. Cut everything. Cloaking, comms, all non-essential power. The moment they lose access to our data, they'll assume the worst. Bonner grinned. I love it. They'll think we detonated already. Exactly. Kara hesitated. And if they don't fall for it? Elias exhaled. Then we'll already be dead. No more time to debate. The ship went dark. Every external signal ceased. The obsidian became a ghost, a dead ship lost in space. The Typhos had no way to confirm what had happened. From their perspective, there had been a growing energy surge, followed by total silence. A weapon going off, or a desperate trick. For a machine, the unknown was unacceptable. The Typhos wouldn't just ignore it. They would react. Seconds passed. Then a full minute. The tension was suffocating. Then it happened. The Typhos moved, but not toward them. The AI made a mistake, a fatal one. The fleet repositioned, pulling back from the asteroid field. Not far, but enough. The AI was recalculating, searching for any sign of the supposed detonation. Kara whispered, They don't know what to do. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. We bought ourselves time. Not victory, but time. And time was everything. Power up the engines, slowly. Keep cloaking minimal. They weren't safe yet. The Typhos weren't retreating. They were adjusting their strategy. But in that moment of doubt, in that fleeting pause, the humans had gained the most important thing, an opening. The asteroid field wasn't just debris. It was an escape route. Bonner worked fast, rerouting energy to propulsion. Kara plotted a new course, threading their path between dense asteroid clusters. The Typhos were scanning frantically, trying to confirm what had happened. Elias' heart pounded. The AI had fallen for the first lie, believing they had a weapon. Now it had fallen for the second lie, believing they had detonated it. And now they would make their final move. The obsidian glided through the field, silent and unseen. The typhos were still searching, scanning, adapting too slowly to human unpredictability. Bonner grinned. "I can't believe this is working." Kara smirked. "That's because they've never fought humans like us before." Elias nodded. "And they never will again. Because humans adapt. Machines don't. And that's why they would win." The obsidian moved through the asteroid field like a phantom, its engines running at the lowest power possible. Every flicker of light, every shift in movement had to be precise. The Typhos fleet was still searching, still scanning the debris for any sign of them. Elias Voss stood at the command console, watching the tactical display. His fingers were tense against the cold metal, his breathing steady but forced. They had made it this far, tricking the eye not once, but twice. The impossible had become reality. But he knew better than to hope. The typhos weren't done. "Status?" he asked, keeping his voice even. Kara Monroe didn't look away from her controls. "Engine stable. We're threading through the debris field at minimal thrust. Cloaking is weak, but holding." Bonner let out a breath. "I can't believe it. They're actually hesitating." Elias didn't answer. The enemy's silence wasn't victory, it was calculation. The typhos weren't giving up. They were adjusting. And when they finally made their move, it would be merciless. A proximity alarm pulsed softly. Kara cursed. Incoming. A single typhos warship, smaller than the fleet's main cruisers, but still more than enough to tear them apart. It had broken off from the main formation, moving straight toward them. Bonner's face darkened. "They're testing us. They still don't know if we're alive." Elias exhaled. "Then we can't let them find out." The warship wasn't firing yet. It was scanning, its sleek black hull weaving between asteroids, searching for any anomaly. Kara whispered, "We need to move faster." "No," Elias said immediately. "We need to stay hidden. Any sudden movement, and they'll see us." The warship drifted closer, a shadow in the void. If it got too close, their cloaking wouldn't matter. It would detect the heat from their engines, the faintest radiation from their systems. Bonner's grip tightened on the console. "We can't just sit here." Elias' mind raced. He needed a distraction, something to throw them off before they got too close. Then, before he could decide, the warship shifted direction. It turned and aimed directly at them. Kara's voice was sharp. "They see us." Everything happened in an instant. The warship fired. A single pulse of energy, a lance of blue light cutting through the darkness. It was too fast, too direct. And then, impact. The obsidian shook violently, metal groaning as the blast struck. Sparks exploded across the bridge. The lights flickered. Systems failed. The ship lurched, spinning wildly as alarms screamed in protest. Elias barely kept his footing. His head slammed against the console, and for a moment, everything blurred. Then he heard it. A sound worse than anything. A scream. He turned, just in time to see Bonner collapse against the wall, blood trailing from his chest. Time slowed. Bonner's eyes were wide, his breath sharp and uneven. The blast hadn't hit them directly, but the explosion had sent shrapnel through the ship, through him. Elias lunged forward, catching Bonner before he could hit the ground. "No, no, no." Bonner coughed, and blood spilled from his lips. His body shook. His hands grasped weakly at Elias' arm. Kara's voice was distant, frantic. "We've lost stabilizers. The hull is compromised." None of it mattered. Elias could only look at Bonner. The man who had kept them alive, who had saved them time and time again, was dying in his arms. Bonner's breathing was shallow, his face twisted in pain. He tried to speak, but the words barely came. Elias leaned in. "Hold on. We're gonna fix this. We're gonna." Bonner shook his head. Weak, slow, but certain. "Don't lie to me, Voss. His voice was barely a whisper. Elias' throat tightened. Bonner grinned, a small, bloody smile. "Guess. This is where I check out, huh?" "No," Elias said, his grip tightening. "Not now. Not like this." Bonner exhaled, his eyes drifting slightly. Elias knew. He knew. And he hated it. Bonner had been more than just a crew member. He had been a brother in the fight. The man who never backed down, who always had a joke, even when everything seemed hopeless. And now he was dying. Kara's voice broke through the haze. "Elias, we need to move, or we're all dead." The Typhos warship was still coming. They had seconds, before the next shot finished them. Bonner coughed again, gripping Elias' arm. His fingers trembled. "Go," he whispered. "You still have a mission." Elias' chest ached. He didn't want to let go. He couldn't. Bonner's breathing hitched. His body tensed, then went still. Elias felt the last bit of life fade from him. And just like that, he was gone. The ship shook again. More alarms blared. Kara was yelling something. But Elias didn't hear it. Something inside him snapped. There was no time for grief. No time for anger. But there would be. There would be time to make them pay. Elias rose slowly, his face unreadable. His hands were stained with Bonner's blood. His body felt heavier than it ever had. But his mind was clear. Cold. Focused. He turned toward the controls. Kara. She looked up, eyes wet, but her hand steady on the console. His voice was quiet. Dangerous. "Get us in close. We're not running anymore." The ship was barely holding together. Sparks rained from shattered control panels, smoke curled through the bridge, and the hull groaned like a dying beast. But Elias Voss wasn't thinking about any of that. Bonner was dead. There was no time to grieve. Not yet. The Typhos warship loomed ahead, its sleek black hull untouched, undamaged, perfect. The AI inside had already adapted to their tricks. The hesitation was gone. The machines had learned. And now, they were moving in for the kill. Kara Monroe's hands were tight on the controls, her knuckles white. "They're charging weapons again. This is it." Elias didn't hesitate. "Then we don't give them the satisfaction." He moved to the navigation panel, overriding safety protocols. The obsidian lurched as he forced the engines to full power. The last of their fuel, the last of their energy. Everything poured into one final push. Kara's eyes widened. "What are you?" Elias' voice was cold. "We're ramming them." For a second, Kara just stared. Then she nodded. "All right." No argument. No hesitation. Because there was no other choice. The Typhos warship adjusted course, tracking their sudden charge. The AI hesitated for a fraction of a second. Humans didn't act like this. They retreated. They fought for survival. But Elias wasn't trying to survive. He was trying to win. Kara rerouted the last of their shielding to the front of the ship. It wouldn't stop a direct hit, but it might give them a few more seconds. The Typhos adjusted. The AI calculated. Then the warship fired. A beam of pure energy sliced through space, cutting toward them like a knife. Elias gritted his teeth and rolled the ship at the last possible moment. The blast grazed their side, burning through the hull. The bridge shook violently as systems failed one by one. The display screens flickered, warning lights flashing. But the ship didn't stop. The Typhos hadn't expected that. Elias' voice was steady. Impact in 3. Kara clenched her jaw. 2. The enemy ship finally reacted, thrusters firing as the AI attempted to pull away. Too late. 1. The obsidian crashed into the Typhos warship with all the force of a dying star. The impact was cataclysmic. Metal screamed as the two ships collided, hulls crumpling like paper. The Typhos vessel twisted, its sleek, perfect structure bending under the raw, reckless brutality of human desperation. Elias was thrown forward, his head slamming against the console. The world blurred. Sound became nothing but static and chaos. Then, silence. For a long moment, he felt nothing, heard nothing. Then a voice, faint, distant. Elias. A hand gripped his shoulder, shaking him. He blinked. The world came back into focus. Kara. She was still here, still alive. He forced himself up. The bridge was a wreck. Half the systems were destroyed. Smoke and debris filled the air. But they weren't dead. And neither were the Typhos. Through the shattered viewport, Elias could see the enemy warship, cracked open, its insides exposed to the void. The impact had crippled it, but its core still pulsed with energy. The AI wasn't done yet. Kara coughed. They're rebooting. If they recover before us. Elias moved before she could finish. We end this now. The Typhos AI had always been stronger, faster, smarter. But humans had something machines never would. Desperation. Madness. The will to win no matter the cost. Elias pulled open a maintenance panel, yanking free a data drive. The ship's last functional one. Bonner's final backup plan. Kara. Can you still access their systems? She nodded, wiping blood from her forehead. Barely. Elias tossed her the drive. Then plug this in. Kara caught it. Her eyes flicked to the broken enemy ship outside. She understood immediately. A slow grin spread across her face. You're insane. Elias nodded. Yeah. Kara moved fast. The obsidian systems were barely hanging on, but she forced them to do one last thing. She linked the drive to the enemy ship. The Typhos AI detected the breach instantly. It resisted, fought back. But it was too late. The data drive contained one final trick. A virus. Not just any virus, a human virus. A piece of imperfect, messy, unpredictable chaos. A fragment of raw, unfiltered insanity that no machine could process. The AI screamed. Not in sound, but in action. Its systems convulsed. Its calculations spiraled into nonsense. Its perfect, logical mind was shattered by something it could never comprehend. Human unpredictability. The enemy warship spammed. Its core overloaded. Elias exhaled. Goodbye. The Typhos vessel detonated. A silent explosion ripped through space, consuming the warship in an instant. The blast sent the obsidian spinning, debris hammering against its broken hull. Everything faded to white. Then, stillness. When Elias opened his eyes, he was on the floor. His body ached. His vision swam. But he was alive. Kara groaned from somewhere nearby. Tell me we won. Elias pulled himself up. The viewport showed nothing but empty space. The Typhos ship was gone. He let out a breath. Yeah. Kara laughed, a raw, exhausted laugh. They had done it. They had beaten the machines. Not with strength, not with firepower. With madness. With desperation. With the one thing no eye could ever understand. The sheer reckless defiance of humanity. Elias Voss opened his eyes to silence. For a moment, he didn't know if he was alive or dead. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on him, every part of his body aching. His vision swam, the world flickering in and out of focus. Smoke drifted through the shattered bridge, and the dim glow of emergency lights cast long shadows. Then a groan. Kara. He turned his head and saw her slumped against the console, her face smeared with dirt and blood. But she was breathing. Alive. Elias let out a slow breath. The ship was barely holding together, but they had won. The Typhos warship was gone. Their AI, so perfect, so unstoppable, had been shattered by human ingenuity, by the one thing they had never accounted for, madness. He forced himself up, every muscle protesting. Sparks flickered from broken systems, and the hull creaked dangerously, but the ship was still floating. They had survived the impossible. Kara shifted, coughing, "We're not dead." Elias gave a weak grin. "Not yet." She let out a short, breathless laugh. "That's a damn miracle." The battle was over. The enemy was destroyed. But now came the hardest part, getting home. Elias limped toward the communication panel, his fingers shaking as he accessed the long-range transmitter. It was barely functional, flickering between static and broken data streams. He pressed a button. "This is Captain Elias Voss of the Obsidian." His voice was hoarse, raw. "To any surviving human forces, the Typhos warship has been destroyed." Silence. The signal was weak. There was no guarantee anyone would hear them. Kara leaned against the console, her breath uneven. "Do you think they're still out there?" Elias didn't know. The last time they had contact, humanity had been on the brink of extinction. The Typhos had crushed every fleet, burned every colony. But if there was even one ship left? He spoke again, stronger this time. "Humanity is still here. We're still fighting." Static. Then, a voice. Faint, distant, but human. "Repeat that." "Voss." Elias froze. The signal crackled, struggling to hold, but it was real. A second voice, clearer, stronger. "Obsidian, this is the UHS Revenant. We copy." Kara's eyes widened. Holy shit. The Revenant, one of humanity's last battleships. They had thought it was lost in the first wave of the war. Elias clenched his fists. They weren't alone. The transmission flickered again, but the voice remained. "We've been in hiding, waiting for an opening. If you took down a Xyphos ship, that changes everything." Elias' heartbeat pounded in his ears. The enemy wasn't invincible. The AI could be beaten. And now, they had proof. Kara sat up straighter. "Then we send them a message." Elias nodded. He turned back to the panel, adjusting the transmission for a broad signal. Not just to the Revenant, not just to any ships in range. To everyone. A message to any survivors, any remnants of the human race. He took a breath. Then he spoke. "This is Captain Elias Voss of the Obsidian. The Typhos are not invincible. We've proven that. They think they've won, that we're finished. They're wrong." His voice was steady now, clear. "To any human still alive, fight, adapt, endure, because we are not done. And to the Typhos, if you're listening." He leaned in, his voice turning sharp, cold. "Run." Then he sent the message. A pulse of data ripped through the stars, spreading across the void, bouncing from relay to relay. The signal carried across dead colonies, broken battlefields, ruined stations, a spark in the darkness. A reminder that humanity was still here. Elias slumped back in his chair, exhausted but alive. The war wasn't over. But now, for the first time in a long time, they had hope.